Elias Rowe wiped the sweat from his forehead and pushed aside a fallen beam. The mining site on Nerithus had been quiet all morning, but a strange sound had drawn him away from the excavation machines. It was a soft, high-pitched squeak, almost like a baby crying. He froze. The sound came again, closer this time. Elias followed it into a narrow tunnel where the light barely reached. There, among the rubble, he saw a small creature struggling to move. It was no animal he had ever seen. Scales shimmered with soft green and gold, and tiny wings twitched as if ready to take flight. Its eyes were large, round, and filled with fear. It looked at him, and for a moment, the baby dragon just stared, trembling. Elias felt his heart tighten. The colony had warned him that dragons were dangerous. Adult dragons, yes, could destroy a building in a single swipe. But this was clearly a hatchling. He could see broken debris on one of its tiny legs, and its wing was bent at an awkward angle. The sight made him forget all caution. "Hey there, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered. He reached slowly, making sure not to scare it further. The dragon made a sound like a squeaky whistle and tried to scramble away. Its little claws slipped on the rocks, and Elias gently scooped it up. The creature let out a tiny hiss but didn't resist. Back at his quarters, Elias set the dragon down on a blanket he had laid on the floor. He looked at it closely. The baby dragon was smaller than a human child, with soft, shining scales and eyes that seemed far older than its size. It tilted its head curiously, as if it was trying to understand the human before it. "Don't worry. You're safe now," Elias said softly. He reached out a hand. The dragon sniffed it, then made a low, bubbling sound. It squeaked again and flapped its tiny wings in an awkward circle. The noise made Elias chuckle. It sounded almost like laughter. The next hour was filled with small discoveries. Elias tried talking to it, repeating simple words like food and friend, and the dragon made noises that sounded like it was trying to repeat him. Its little tongue flicked in and out, and sometimes it squeaked in patterns that almost sounded like syllables. Elias found himself leaning closer, fascinated. The dragon's attempts were clumsy but full of personality. The colony workers who came to check on him were shocked. "You brought a dragon here?" one of them shouted. "Do you know what that means?" Elias shook his head. "It's just a baby. It's hurt. It needs help." They argued, worried about safety, but Elias held firm. He could feel a bond forming, something he couldn't explain. The dragon seemed to sense it too. Every time he spoke or moved closer, the little creature responded with tiny squeaks, chirps, and wing flaps that seemed to ask questions. Sometimes, when he laughed at its mistakes, it would tilt its head and make a sound that almost sounded like a giggle. By nightfall, the dragon had grown bold enough to crawl onto Elias' lap. Its small body pressed against him, shivering from fear and cold. Elias stroked its scales gently, careful not to hurt it. The creature responded by nuzzling his hand, letting out soft, musical whistles. For the first time, Elias felt like he was being understood, even without words. He named the dragon Fizz, after the tiny popping noises it made. Fizz seemed to respond immediately, tilting its head and squeaking happily. Elias laughed. The sound was strange, but there was something joyful in it, something alive. That night, Elias stayed awake longer than usual. He watched Fizz curl up in a small ball, its wings folding carefully over its tiny body. He thought about the warnings he had received about dragons, about danger, and the fear in the colony. But all of that seemed far away now. Here was a creature that was scared, small, and curious, just like him in some ways. As the lights of the colony dimmed, Elias felt a mixture of hope and wonder. He wondered if Fizz would ever be able to speak properly, or if he would ever understand the dragon completely. But at that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was trust, bravery, and the first flicker of a bond between a human and a creature no one thought could be tamed. Fizz shifted in his lap and let out a small, squeaky noise, almost like it was saying, "Thank you." Elias smiled, unsure if it was real words or just sounds, but he felt the weight of meaning in it. In that quiet room, on a faraway planet, human courage had met dragon humor, and the beginning of something extraordinary had already started. The next morning, Elias woke to find Fizz perched on the edge of his cot, wings fluttering slightly as if eager to start the day. The tiny dragon had grown more confident overnight, and its curiosity was impossible to contain. Elias smiled. Today, he decided, they would try to understand each other better. He pulled out a small notebook and a pen, scribbling down simple words: food, friend, come, play. He pointed at each word and said it slowly. Fizz cocked its head and made a high-pitched squeak. It tried to mimic the sound, but it came out more like a tiny whistle with strange pops and clicks. Elias laughed, the sound echoing in the small room. "You're trying," he said, scratching behind Fizz's ears. The dragon's eyes sparkled. It squeaked again, more insistently this time, and wagged its little tail. Elias felt a thrill. The creature wasn't just making noise, it was trying to communicate. The challenge, however, was bigger than he expected. Fizz had its own sense of humor. Whenever Elias said, "food," Fizz would squeak a reply and run in the opposite direction. If he said, "come," Fizz would tilt its head, then hop onto a chair and wiggle its wings, as if laughing at him. Each attempt at training turned into a playful game. It was frustrating, but also strangely endearing. By mid-morning, Elias realized that Fizz was learning patterns, not words. The dragon noticed that certain tones made him laugh, certain gestures made him smile. So, Fizz began to experiment. It squeaked in ways that sounded almost like human words, imitating the rhythm of Elias' voice. Sometimes, Elias swore it whispered, "Elias," when it was excited. Word of the dragon's antics spread quickly through the colony. A few brave miners peeked in and couldn't believe their eyes. "He's teaching it," one of them whispered. Another shook his head. "That's impossible. Dragons don't talk." Elias ignored them. The moments he shared with Fizz were too special. He watched the dragon's tiny chest rise and fall as it tried to repeat the simplest words. "Friend," he said slowly, pointing to himself. Fizz chirped, then squeaked something that sounded like, "FR fun." Elias laughed so hard that tears filled his eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The little dragon's humor grew bolder. During mealtime, Elias held out a small tray of alien fruits. Fizz squeaked, flapped its wings, and pushed the tray onto the floor. Elias frowned, but the dragon stared at him with wide, bright eyes, making a sound that seemed like laughter. Elias shook his head, realizing Fizz was playing a prank. He chuckled. Even in the face of mischief, he couldn't be angry. Elias tried recording Fizz's sounds, hoping to study them later. But Fizz quickly caught on. Every time he turned on the recorder, the dragon would make the funniest noises, popping, squeaking, and even a small whistle that sounded suspiciously like giggling. Elias shook his head in disbelief. "You really are something else," he said. He began to see that Fizz's humor wasn't just funny, it was clever. The baby dragon was learning how to make him laugh, testing boundaries, and showing personality. By afternoon, Fizz had grown bolder. Elias had placed a small mirror on the floor. Fizz waddled over and looked at its reflection, then squeaked in surprise. It tilted its head and made a series of popping sounds, as if trying to talk to the image. Elias watched, fascinated. The dragon wasn't just copying noises anymore, it was experimenting, thinking, playing with language in its own way. Elias decided to try one more exercise. He crouched on the floor and said slowly, "Fizz, say Elias." The little dragon tilted its head, thought for a moment, and squeaked. The sound was awkward, almost a mix of pops and whistles, but it came close to a human word. Elias' eyes widened. "That's it. That's your first word," he exclaimed, reaching out to scratch Fizz behind the ears. The dragon chirped proudly, its tiny chest puffing up. The moment was interrupted by a loud bang outside the quarters. The colony council had come to inspect. They froze when they saw Fizz perched on Elias' shoulder, squeaking happily. That's a dragon," one of them stammered. And it's trying to speak? Elias smiled, holding Fizz carefully. Yes. And it's learning, faster than anyone expected. He saw the council's skepticism, but also the hint of awe. Fizz let out a soft, squeaky whistle, almost like a giggle directed at the humans, as if it knew their thoughts. For the first time, the colony saw something new, not just a dragon, but a creature that could understand, interact, and even joke with humans. Elias felt pride swell inside him. He realized that courage wasn't just about facing dangers, it was about patience, empathy, and the willingness to trust a tiny creature that everyone else feared. As night fell, Elias and Fizz sat together, the little dragon snuggling against his chest. Its tiny wings twitched in excitement, and it made soft, playful noises. Elias whispered to him, "We'll learn more together, Fizz. One word at a time." Fizz squeaked, and Elias laughed. In that quiet room, human courage and dragon humor were no longer separate, they had begun a conversation that neither of them would forget. The next morning, the colony awoke to a distant roar that shook the ground. Elias had just woken Fizz from a nap when the sound echoed again, louder and closer. The little dragon froze, ears flicking, wings trembling. Elias immediately recognized the sound. The predators of Narithis were hunting, and they were near. He lifted Fizz carefully, holding him against his chest. "Stay calm, little one. We'll figure this out," he whispered. Fizz squeaked softly, pressing against him. Elias could feel the tiny dragon's fear, but he also felt something else, trust. The creature believed in him, even in the face of danger. Elias ran outside the quarters, scanning the alien forest that bordered the colony. Among the thick, twisted trees, he could see shadows moving. Massive dragons, older and far larger than Fizz, were prowling toward the settlement. One in particular stood out, a black-scaled predator, known in old colony records as a shadow wyrm. It had jagged spikes along its back and eyes that glowed faint red in the dim light. Elias knew it could destroy the colony if it attacked, and it would not hesitate. He ducked into an alley, holding Fizz close. "We can't fight it head-on. We have to be smart," he muttered. His mind raced, thinking of the terrain, the tools, anything that could give them an advantage. Fizz let out a series of squeaks that sounded almost urgent, flapping its wings as if to signal agreement. Elias nodded, realizing the little dragon understood more than he imagined. The colony workers were panicking. Doors slammed, alarms rang, and shouts filled the air. Elias sprinted toward the central control station, weaving through the chaos. "Get to safety," he shouted to the miners. But he didn't stop. With Fizz in his arms, he led a small group toward a narrow ravine near the forest. It was risky, but the cliffs and rocky terrain could give them cover from the predator. As they moved, the shadow wyrm appeared at the edge of the forest, its massive head turning toward them. Fizz squeaked loudly, stretching his wings in warning. Then, in a sudden burst of energy, the little dragon darted toward the predator, squeaking and flapping with surprising force. The wyrm hesitated, confused by the tiny, fearless creature. Elias couldn't help but let out a laugh. "That's my dragon." The predator lunged, and Elias rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding its massive claws. Fizz zipped around the wyrm's head, squeaking in a way that sounded like taunting. Every so often, the baby dragon let out a noise that seemed almost like words, and Elias realized Fizz was deliberately distracting the predator to protect him. His chest swelled with pride. The colony might call them crazy, but Elias saw courage in its purest form, both human and dragon. They made it to the ravine, where the group found temporary cover behind jagged rocks. Elias lowered Fizz to the ground and motioned for the colony workers to follow. "Stay low. Don't make noise," he instructed. Fizz crouched, wings folded, but every so often it popped out with a squeak, testing the predator's patience. The creature's humor was more than play, it was a weapon. Minutes stretched into tension-filled hours. Elias observed the wyrm carefully. It prowled the edge of the forest, sniffing the air, growling in frustration. Fizz began to experiment with sounds again, squeaking and clicking in quick bursts. Each noise drew a reaction from the predator, forcing it to chase invisible targets, wasting energy while Elias guided the group to safer ground. Finally, the WYRM lunged at a shadow, only to slam into a rock and stumble. Elias seized the moment. Now! Move! He grabbed Fizz again and sprinted toward the cliffs where a hidden cave awaited. The colony workers followed, scrambling over rocks and tree roots. The predator roared in anger but hesitated at the edge of the cliff. It couldn't follow without risking a fall. Inside the cave, Elias set Fizz down. The baby dragon flopped onto the ground, panting from exertion but chirping excitedly. Elias laughed, relief washing over him. "You did it, little one. You kept us alive." Fizz squeaked back, nuzzling his hand. The bond between them had grown stronger through fire, fear, and courage. As the night fell, Elias and Fizz sat at the mouth of the cave, listening to the distant roars of the WYRM and its kin. The colony was safe for now, but Elias knew this was only the beginning. Fizz tilted his head and made a small, high-pitched noise that sounded almost like a chuckle. Elias smiled. Even in danger, the little dragon had humor, bravery, and cunning. He looked out over the forest and whispered, "We'll face them together, Fizz. You and me, against whatever comes next." The baby dragon squeaked in agreement, its tiny body trembling but full of energy. In that moment, Elias understood something vital: human courage wasn't just about strength. It was about trust, empathy, and the willingness to face the unknown with a creature who could laugh, fight, and survive alongside you. And as they sat there, side by side, Elias knew that Fizz's first words were coming. They would not be ordinary words, they would carry humor, courage, and the promise of adventures that no one in the colony could yet imagine. The morning sun barely touched the horizon when Elias woke in the cave, Fizz curled against his chest, eyes blinking sleepily. The forest outside was quiet, but Elias knew the danger had not disappeared. The shadow WYRM was still out there, waiting, and others of its kind prowled nearby. He gently lifted Fizz and whispered, "Time to show them what we can do." They returned to the colony cautiously, moving through hidden paths and keeping low. Elias had a plan. He would prove that Fizz was not just a baby dragon, but a creature capable of intelligence, humor, and even cooperation. The council needed to see it themselves. If they understood, the colony could unite, and together they could face any threat. When they arrived, the council members were tense, armed and watchful. "Elias, what is that thing?" one of them demanded. "It's dangerous. We warned you about dragons." Elias held Fizz up gently. "It's more than that," he said. "This is a young dragon, yes, but it's capable of learning, of understanding. And it's been helping us survive. You need to see for yourselves." Fizz, as if understanding, chirped and flapped its tiny wings. Then, it did something remarkable. It squeaked in a way that sounded like laughter, and repeated the word, "Elias," almost perfectly. The council gasped. The little dragon turned to each member, popping and chirping in patterns that almost sounded like speech. Some words were distorted, some were playful, but the intent was clear. Fizz was trying to communicate. The council stared, speechless. No one had ever seen anything like it, a dragon that could imitate words, show personality, and even humor. Elias smiled. "It understands us. It can learn. And it can help us survive against the predators outside." Suddenly, a loud roar cut through the morning air. The shadow WYRM had returned, moving toward the colony with intent. Panic erupted. Workers scattered, weapons were grabbed, and the council looked to Elias. "Now show us what you mean," one shouted. Elias set Fizz down and crouched behind a barricade. The little dragon's eyes sparkled. It squeaked and flapped, then darted toward the WYRM, making high-pitched noises and playful chirps. The predator froze, confused. Every time it lunged, Fizz zipped out of reach, squeaking in ways that seemed almost like taunting. The WYRM roared in frustration, thrashing, but Elias realized it was being manipulated. "Follow my lead," Elias shouted to the colonists. Using his knowledge of the terrain, he guided them to strategically placed rocks, trenches, and debris. Each time the WIRM lunged, Fizz darted, forcing it into traps Elias had improvised. The colony workers watched, astonished. The little dragon's humor, cleverness, and courage were saving them. Elias moved with confidence, showing the council what human bravery could achieve when combined with intelligence, even from an alien creature. As the fight continued, Fizz made small noises that sounded almost like words, repeating patterns Elias had taught it. He realized the baby dragon was improvising, using its sounds to manipulate the predator. Each squeak, pop, and whistle was intentional, clever, and effective. Elias couldn't help but laugh between shouts and commands. Humor had become a weapon. Finally, the shadow WIRM stumbled into a trap Elias had set earlier, a pit camouflaged with rocks and debris. It roared in anger but could not escape. The colony erupted in cheers. Fizz flapped its wings proudly, squeaking excitedly, as if celebrating their victory. The council members stared, wide-eyed. Elias knelt beside Fizz and whispered, "We did it. Together." The dragon chirped softly, nudging his hand, and for a brief moment, the two shared a silent understanding. Courage and cleverness, humor and trust, they had faced impossible odds and won. The council slowly approached, still in disbelief. One of them finally spoke. "Elias. I never thought a human could manage this. But you did. And the dragon, it's incredible." Fizz, as if sensing approval, repeated the word human in a chirp that sounded almost like a joke. The council laughed, relief and wonder mixing together. The little dragon had not only survived but had united the colony through its humor, courage, and intelligence. By evening, the colony began to rebuild and reorganize, inspired by what they had witnessed. They worked together, guided by Elias and accompanied by Fizz, who flitted among them, making noises that lifted spirits and lightened fear. Even the most skeptical colonists could not deny the bond that had formed. Human courage and dragon humor had created unity, strength, and hope. As night fell, Elias sat outside, Fizz curled on his lap. The stars of Narithus twinkled above, distant but bright. Elias looked at the little dragon and smiled. "You've shown them what we can do. And I think, you might be ready for your first real word soon." Fizz squeaked in response, tilting its head, as if acknowledging the challenge. Elias felt a deep sense of pride. Not because of the victory over the predator, but because he had helped the colony see something bigger, that courage, empathy, and cleverness were what made humans extraordinary. And sometimes, even the smallest creature could teach them a lesson in humor, trust, and ingenuity. That night, as the colony settled and the predators retreated into the dark forest, Elias whispered to Fizz, "Tomorrow, we teach them even more. Together, we're unstoppable." Fizz chirped softly, wings twitching in excitement. In that quiet moment, human courage and dragon humor had not only survived, they had united a colony and sparked a future that no one could have imagined. The morning on Narithus began quiet, almost peaceful. Elias woke to the soft flutter of wings and Fizz's tiny squeaks. The little dragon was awake early, full of energy and mischief. Elias smiled, stroking the dragon's shimmering scales. "Today feels like a day for words," he whispered. Fizz blinked and let out a high-pitched whistle, as if agreeing. The colony was buzzing with renewed hope. After the attack by the shadow WIRM, the workers had rebuilt barricades and reinforced defenses. But more importantly, they had seen courage and intelligence in action, human courage, and Fizz's humor and cleverness. The council had even called a meeting, not to debate the dragon's presence, but to understand how to work with it. Elias carried Fizz to the center of the colony. Workers and council members gathered, curious and cautious. The little dragon hopped onto a raised platform, tail twitching with excitement. It squeaked and chirped, tilting its head as it observed the crowd. The colonists leaned forward, expecting nothing more than sounds and antics. Elias knelt beside Fizz. "Are you ready, little one?" he asked. Fizz responded with a playful squeak and flapped its wings. Elias nodded to the council. Watch closely. This is the first time Fizz will try to speak fully. You will see what we've worked on. Fizz opened its tiny mouth and made a series of whistles and pops, the sound strange yet musical. Then, in a moment that froze everyone, it let out a word, clear, distinct, and unexpected: human. The crowd gasped. Elias' heart raced. Fizz's voice was small, but it carried weight, meaning, and pride. The little dragon chirped again, pushing the word further, adding a second, friend. It squeaked and flapped its wings, tilting its head at Elias as if to say, "We did this together." The colony erupted in cheers. People clapped, laughed, and even cried. They had witnessed something impossible, a creature once feared, now speaking, expressing friendship, and recognizing humans as allies. Elias picked up Fizz carefully and held him close. You did it, little one. You spoke your first words, and you've changed everything. Fizz chirped happily, nuzzling Elias' hand. It squeaked in a playful rhythm that sounded almost like laughter, and the colonists realized that this dragon had a sense of humor as sharp as its courage. The council members stepped forward, hesitant at first, then smiling. Elias, one said, we underestimated what humans could do. And it seems we underestimated this creature, too. Together, you've shown us something extraordinary. Elias looked at Fizz, then back at the crowd. This isn't just about a dragon learning words, he said. It's about courage. It's about trusting the unknown. We faced danger, fear, and uncertainty, and we came through because we worked together. Human courage met dragon humor, and it saved us all. Fizz chirped loudly, as if emphasizing the point, and then made another word, colony. The crowd laughed, clapped, and cheered again. They could see the dragon's intelligence, playfulness, and loyalty. Children ran forward to watch Fizz, mimicking its squeaks, while adults marveled at the creature's cleverness. Elias realized that this was more than victory, it was a legacy. Fizz had become a symbol, proof that humans could face impossible challenges with creativity, courage, and empathy. The little dragon's humor, curiosity, and bravery had not only saved lives but united the colony in ways no council decree could. That evening, Elias sat outside with Fizz resting on his shoulder. The stars of Narithus glittered above, and the alien forest stretched into shadowy distance. Elias whispered, "We've come a long way, little one. And this is only the beginning. There will be more challenges, more threats, but together, we can handle anything." Fizz chirped softly, nestling closer, wings twitching in contentment. Suddenly, Fizz let out another clear, playful word, Elias. It squeaked in a pattern that sounded almost like laughter, proud and teasing. Elias laughed back, feeling warmth and joy spread through him. That single word held trust, respect, humor, and the bond they had forged. Human courage and dragon humor were now inseparable, a partnership that had changed their world forever. The colony watched quietly from a distance, realizing the truth. Humans were extraordinary, not just for strength or technology, but for heart, bravery, and the ability to inspire loyalty even in alien life. Fizz had shown them the humor, cleverness, and courage of a species once thought untamable, and Elias had led the way. As night deepened, Elias whispered once more, "Rest now, Fizz. Tomorrow we explore more. We learn more. And we grow stronger." The little dragon chirped softly in reply, closing its eyes, wings folding neatly around its tiny body. The colony slept peacefully, knowing they were not alone. They had human courage, they had a dragon's humor, and together they had a future filled with hope, friendship, and unimaginable adventures. And somewhere in the distance, hidden among the forests, the predators watched silently, but Elias felt no fear. With courage, humor, and trust, humans and dragons were unstoppable.